I didn't plan to go. Honestly, I almost deleted the email before finishing the first line. It was just one of those polite invites, the kind people send when they don't actually expect you to come. Women over 70 travel group. Athens in spring. I remember staring at it, the cursor blinking on the screen like it was judging me. Athens. Me. 72. I laughed out loud, that short, bitter kind of laugh that hides a sting. I'd spent half my life planning other people's trips, booking their flights, packing their bags, smiling at the airport when they waved goodbye, saying, "You go ahead. I'll be fine." And I always was. Fine, I mean. Or at least, that's what I told myself. But that night I couldn't sleep. The thought of that email, that ridiculous idea of flying across the world, it wouldn't leave me alone. I kept picturing my kitchen, the same clock ticking on the wall, the same cup of tea cooling beside the same empty chair. And then this voice, quiet but steady, whispered, "What if you went?" The next morning I booked the ticket. Wait. I didn't tell anyone. Not my son, not my daughter-in-law, not even my granddaughter, who'd probably think it was so cool, in that way teenagers do when they don't really understand. No, I just packed my bag like I was running an errand. A few dresses, some shoes, a small bottle of perfume I hadn't worn in years. And my husband's old camera. The one he never really used but always said he would someday. When the plane lifted off, I didn't feel brave. Felt terrified. The kind of fear that sits low in your stomach and hums. What was I doing? Why was I going? The woman next to me, French, maybe in her late 60s, smiled. "First time?" she asked. He nodded. "Something like that." She introduced herself. Rosalie. We talked the way strangers sometimes do. Freely, because you know you'll probably never see each other again. But she had this way of looking at me like she wasn't just hearing the words I said, but the ones I didn't. And for the first time in a long time I didn't feel invisible. By the time we landed, I'd already decided I liked her. There was a confidence in the way she moved, like the world had once tried to tell her she was done, and she just laughed and kept walking. Envied that. The next afternoon we sat under a vine-covered terrace in a small cafe, sipping cold white wine. She talked about her students, the troublemakers she secretly liked most. I told her about my garden back home, how the tomatoes never cooperated, no matter how gently I spoke to them. Then she asked, "And your family?" That question hung in the air like a thread I didn't want to pull. "They're fine," I said finally. "They just thought I was too old to travel." Rosalie didn't react dramatically. She just took a slow sip of her wine and said, "You're here. So they were wrong." That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling. Her words echoed in my mind, unsettling like they'd knocked something loose inside me. All the years I'd stayed in my lane. The birthday parties I cooked for but never sat down to enjoy. The vacations I paid for but wasn't invited on. The hundreds of times I'd told myself, "They're just busy." But lying there in that foreign room, with the sound of traffic and laughter drifting through the window, I realized something. I wasn't needed. Not really. At least not in the way I'd been told I was. In the morning, Rosalie knocked on my door, a folded map in her hand and a spark in her eye. "Florence," she said. "It's not far. I've always wanted to see the Uffizi." I hesitated. Then I smiled. "Why not?" We booked the train tickets that afternoon. 2 women over 70 buying one-way seats like students on summer break. And when the tickets printed and the machine spit them out warm into my hand, I felt something stir. Not fear. Not duty. Something I hadn't felt in years. Possibility. That night, she received a message from home, one she couldn't bring herself to answer. Not yet. That night, the room was quiet, the kind of quiet that makes you notice your own breathing. The lamp cast a soft glow across the ceiling. I lay there, wide awake, thinking about how strange it felt to be somewhere new and to not belong to anyone for a change. Then my phone buzzed. Message. "Did you check the garden? The sprinkler system's been weird lately." "No hi. No how are you?" Just that. Another message followed. "Where are you?" I stared at the screen. Not because I didn't know what to say, but because I finally didn't want to say anything. For years I jumped at every message, every call. Dinner needed cooking. Someone was sick. School event. A birthday I had to plan but wasn't really part of. That had been my rhythm. Waiting to be needed, like some kind of invisible service bell only they could ring. But that night I didn't respond. Instead I powered the phone off, set it in the drawer, and just listened. To the sound of distant laughter outside, to the hum of the city, to my own pulse reminding me I was still alive. Rosalie knocked the next morning. She didn't wait for me to answer. Just opened the door and walked in holding 2 train tickets. "Florence awaits," she said with that half-smile of hers. And suddenly it was decided. The train left just after 9. We sat side by side in a quiet car, our bags above us, a paper bag of croissants between us. Rosalie read a mystery novel in French. I stared out the window. The countryside rolled past in gold and green, stitched with vineyards and sleepy little towns that looked like watercolor paintings. It reminded me of a painting my husband once bought at a flea market. Cheap frame but beautiful inside. He said it reminded him of places he'd never been. Funny, I thought, how I was now living inside his someday. We didn't talk much on that train. That was the comfort of Rosalie. She didn't need to fill silence. She didn't prod. She just existed beside me, still, kind, certain. At one point, she broke a croissant in half and held the bigger piece toward me without a word. Took it. Mile. That was enough. Florence greeted us with warm air and the sound of church bells echoing through narrow streets. Our hotel was old, charming, the kind where the elevator creaked, and the keys were heavy brass with frayed leather tags. Our room had a tiny balcony overlooking a maze of red rooftops and laundry lines. "I want to see Botticelli," Rosalie said, tossing her hat onto the bed. "And maybe something ridiculous and expensive I'll never wear." We did both. The Uffizi was crowded, the kind of crowded that makes you inch forward like a tide. But when we finally stood in front of the Birth of Venus, I felt something loosen in me. Not awe, recognition. There was something about her, the way she stood, exposed but unashamed, soft but certain, that felt like remembering. Like realizing beauty didn't always have to shout. Sometimes it whispered. Afterward we found a small cafe near the river. Rosalie ordered wine. The waiter flirted shamelessly. She flirted back. I laughed. Genuinely laughed, for the first time in a long time. That night over dinner, she looked at me across the candlelight and said, "You're different now." Different. You sit taller. Less folded. I didn't know how to respond, so I just nodded. But she was right. Something was shifting. Slowly. Quietly. Later, in our room, I gave into habit and checked my phone. 24 missed calls. 14 from my daughter-in-law. The rest from my son. I scrolled through the messages. "Where are you? Are you okay? Did something happen?" And then one voice memo from my son. His voice tired, clipped. "Mom, please call us. The kids are upset. We thought you'd be home." I listened to it twice. Then a third time. But I felt nothing. Not anger. Not guilt. Just distance. The kind that doesn't ache anymore, it just breathes. The next morning, Rosalie slept in. I wandered through a quiet part of the city. No map, no plan. Found a little shop with linen skirts and silver earrings. Tried both, bought neither. By afternoon, we were back on a hill in Fiesole, looking down over Florence. The city shimmered below us like a memory you don't realize you're missing until it's right there. "This," I said softly, not meaning the view exactly. This was missing. Rosalie nodded like she already knew. When we got back, there was another message. My son again. "Mom, did you cancel our vacation on purpose?" We got to the airport and never mind. Just call. Please. I turned the phone off again. That night, as we walked back from dinner, Rosalie looked at me and said, "So, where next?" I didn't even have to think. "Lisbon," I said. She smiled. "Good. I've always wanted to hear Father live." But when we got to Lisbon, something shifted again. Not in the world around me but inside. And this time it wasn't just about freedom. It was about choice. Lisbon greeted us like an old friend. Warm, weathered, a little disheveled, and full of music that didn't need to be understood to be felt. The air smelled of rain and roasted chestnuts. The cobblestones shimmered from last night's drizzle, and even the light felt different. Softer somehow, but alive. We stayed in a small guest house with blue shutters and walls covered in patterned tiles. Our room overlooked a quiet square where children kicked a soccer ball between rusted benches. I stood on the balcony that first evening, watching the sun dissolve into the horizon. The voices below, quick, melodic Portuguese, felt like wind moving through leaves. Rosalie wasn't feeling well that night. Just a bit of a fever, she waved it off. I've been worse. Do you want me to get you something? Yes. Just don't fuss, she smiled. You'll ruin my reputation as a woman of mystery. I stayed anyway. Made her tea. Sat by her bed reading from a book we'd picked up in Florence. She fell asleep halfway through a paragraph, her breathing soft and steady. And sitting there, the light dim, her hand resting near the edge of the blanket, I felt something I hadn't felt in decades. For years I'd taken care of everyone. Kids, grandkids, my husband, even the dog. Always out of love, but also because I didn't know who I was without being needed. But this felt different. This wasn't duty. It was choice. A quiet act of care that came from wanting, not obligation. When she woke up, her fever had broken. Thank you, she said softly. For the tea. For not leaving. That night I cooked. Nothing fancy. Just eggs, bread, and tomatoes I bought from a man at the corner market who smiled like we'd known each other in another life. We ate on the balcony wrapped in shawls. She looked stronger, her color back. And I felt lighter too. Not because I'd done anything grand, but because, for once, I hadn't disappeared in the act of giving. The next morning I woke to the sound of music. That aching ancient voice of Fathu, spilling into the streets from somewhere nearby. It was haunting, the kind of song that finds its way through your ribs and stays there. A man sang about longing, not to be loved, but to be remembered. I stood barefoot on the balcony, arms crossed against the morning chill, and just listened. And I thought, maybe that's all most of us really want. Not applause. Not permission. Just to be seen before we fade. Later that day, Rosalie was well enough to walk. We moved slowly through the city, past faded churches and crumbling walls dressed in graffiti and ivy. There was one church we passed, doors wide open, incense curling into the street. I didn't go in. I just watched. A woman lit a candle, knelt down, and pressed her palms together like she was holding something fragile between them. And for some reason it hit me. That's what I'd been doing for years, holding my life like it was something too delicate to touch. Careful not to disturb it. Careful not to want too much. But I was tired of careful. Back at the guest house I turned my phone on again. 5 new messages. My daughter-in-law. This isn't funny, Helen. Another. We're not sure what to tell the kids. And one from my son. You've made your point. Had I? I wasn't even sure what point they thought I was making. Rosalie saw me reading them. She didn't ask. Just poured me tea, slid the cup across the table and said, "They'll come around." I didn't answer. That night, we found a tiny Fathu bar tucked between 2 narrow alleys strung with laundry. No tourists, no stage lights, just locals, clinking glasses and a woman with a voice that sounded like rusted silk. She sang about being left behind. About surviving anyway. I didn't understand the words, but I understood the ache. It wasn't sadness. It was something deeper, something like truth. I sat there with my eyes closed, listening, breathing, feeling. And for the first time I realized. I hadn't left home to make a point. I'd left because I was tired of waiting for permission to live. But the next morning I found something I didn't expect. A letter slipped under my door, written in a hand I knew by heart. And suddenly, freedom didn't feel so simple anymore. It was the sound of paper sliding against tile that woke me. Subtle. But enough to cut through the early morning quiet. When I opened the door, it was there. A folded letter, no envelope, just my name written in a hand that made my chest tighten. David. For a second I just stood there, staring at it like it might vanish if I blinked too long. Then I picked it up, sat on the edge of the bed, and just held it. Heavy for its size, full of everything I didn't want to read but probably needed to. Rosalie was tying her scarf in front of the mirror. She saw it, didn't ask. She'd learned by now that silence was sometimes the only kindness worth offering. When I finally opened it, the words were short, rushed, controlled. The kind of tone people use when they're pretending they're calm but their hearts are on fire. "Mom, we don't understand what you're doing. The kids are confused." Amelia cried. "We thought you were just upset, but this is something else. If you're trying to punish us, you've made your point. Please come home." It wasn't cruel, but it wasn't kind either. It was the kind of message that sounded like concern but tasted like guilt. I folded the letter back into thirds, the way he'd sent it, and placed it in the drawer beside my bed. My hands were steady, but my pulse wasn't. Rosalie glanced at me through the mirror. So, I said, "we're having breakfast. Or mourning the penmanship of disappointing sons." She laughed, sharp and bright like breaking glass. And that was that. We ate in the courtyard. Sunlight dripping through vines, the smell of coffee and sweet bread softening the morning. Rosalie talked about trams, museums, the kind of small talk that keeps the world spinning. I smiled and nodded, but my mind was somewhere else. Halfway between the woman who'd always stayed quiet and the one who was just beginning to speak. Because the truth was, I hadn't left to punish anyone. I'd left because I was tired of asking for a seat at a table that kept shrinking every year. Birthdays had turned into text messages. Holidays were too busy this year, maybe next. And the family trips, the ones full of laughter and salt air and togetherness, came with an unspoken rule. Grandma stays behind. They hadn't stopped loving me. They just stopped seeing me. Later that day, I walked alone down to the river. The air smelled of metal and bread. The water was slow, reflecting the lazy clouds above. I sat on a low stone wall, the kind that's seen too many stories to care about yours. My hands rested in my lap. Still, quiet, old but sure. And I thought of Amelia. Justine. Always a spark. Always the one to send me those silly filters. Bunny ears, angel halos. Because, "You're too serious, Grandma." She didn't know about the tickets. Didn't know I'd cancelled the trip. She probably thought I'd just chosen not to go. Pulled out my phone. Opened a new message. Typed slowly. "Sweetheart, I'm fine. I'm traveling. Not angry. Not hiding. Just needed a bit of sky. Don't worry. Love you." I hit send before I could second-guess it. Half an hour later, Rosalie appeared, carrying 2 small paper bags. "Pastillas de nata," she said proudly. "You can't leave Lisbon without them." We sat side by side, eating in silence, watching shadows grow long across the stones. The sweetness melted on my tongue like something almost holy. That night, as the city hummed and the river glowed under the lamps, I slept deeper than I had in years. Not the sleep of peace, but the sleep of someone who'd finally stopped waiting to be needed. But peace doesn't last long when the world's not done testing you. Because the next morning, Rosalie handed me 2 train tickets. And with one look, I knew this story wasn't finished yet. I woke to the sound of rustling paper. Not the quiet kind, but the kind that meant decisions had been made. When I looked up, Rosalie was standing by the window, hair pinned, lips pursed, holding 2 train tickets like an offering. "Seville," she said simply. "We're going." And blinked. "We are." She smiled, the kind of smile that tells you there's no point arguing. "You think I came this far just to stop now?" So we packed. 2 women over 70, folding our lives into neat little bags as if adventure had always been part of the plan. When we boarded the train, the world outside was golden and endless. Vineyards stretched like brushstrokes across the land. Rosalie read her newspaper in French. I watched the countryside slide by, each field carrying a story I'd never been told. "Do you ever wonder what's next?" Yes. She didn't look up. "Always. But the trick is not to need an answer." The rhythm of the train rocked us gently, A lullaby for women who'd spent too many years running on everyone else's time. When we arrived in Seville, the heat wrapped around us like a memory. Thick, persistent, alive. The city didn't whisper, it sang. Drums in the streets. Laughter from balconies. Voices spilling out of open windows. Our hotel was tucked between a bakery and a shoe shop that smelled like leather and dust. The air inside was cool, old, familiar. Rosalie dropped her suitcase and declared, "This place demands earrings." She disappeared into the bathroom and emerged with silver hoops that shimmered when she turned her head. I didn't have earrings, but I had that yellow scarf from Lisbon. The one I wasn't sure why I'd bought. I tied it around my neck, bright, defiant. We went out that evening without a plan. Just two old women walking through a city that didn't care how old we were. The streets pulsed under our feet. We followed the sound of clapping, sharp, rhythmic, electric, until we found it. A small courtyard lit by string lights, where a woman danced flamenco. Her dress was red, her body sure, her face lined and beautiful. She wasn't smiling. She didn't need to. Every step she took hit the ground like a declaration. Rosalie leaned toward me and whispered, "She's older than we are." I looked closer. She was, maybe mid-70s. Her feet struck the floor with the force of a promise. The crowd cheered, but I didn't move. I couldn't. I wasn't watching a performance. I was watching defiance turned into grace. It was like seeing a version of myself I'd buried years ago, the one who once believed she could be something other than useful. When the song ended, I clapped until my palms stung. That night, back at the hotel, I found a message from Amelia. "Grandma, where are you now? Your photo from Lisbon was amazing. I showed it to my art teacher. She said you have a really good eye. Can I call you soon?" I frowned. I hadn't sent her a photo. I opened my gallery, and there it was. A picture of me on the balcony in Lisbon, arm resting on the railing, looking out at the street. I didn't remember taking it. I didn't even remember standing still like that. But there I was, not posing, not performing, just existing. Type back. Seville now. It's hot, stubborn, and full of beautiful noise. You'd love it here. Rosalie came out of the bathroom, hair down, humming something soft. "Do you believe in fate?" she asked suddenly. Smiled. "I'm starting to." We stood by the open window, the air thick with night and oranges. Somewhere in the distance, another flamenco dancer struck her heel against the floor. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like I was missing anything. But peace doesn't mean the world forgets you. Because the next morning my phone rang again. And this time it wasn't Amelia. It was my son. 26 missed calls later, I finally had to decide whether silence was strength or avoidance. The phone wouldn't stop ringing. Morning light spilled across the hotel room, slicing through the thin curtains, and there it was again, that shrill sound. My name flashing on the screen again and again, in my son's handwriting. David. Call after call. Message after message. 26 of them in 2 days. I didn't answer a single one. Not because I wanted to hurt him, but because for the first time in my life, I wanted to hear my own silence. I stared at the screen until it went dark again. That little glowing rectangle. It had dictated so much of my life. The texts, the "Can you babysit?" The "We'll stop by if we have time." All of it was noise pretending to be connection. But now the quiet was mine. Rosalie was already dressed when I stepped out of the bathroom. She wore a wide-brimmed hat and a linen dress that floated when she moved. She looked like a woman who refused to be defined by time. "There's a market by the river," she said. "And I feel like haggling." So we went. The streets were alive. Men shouting prices, women laughing, kids running wild between stalls. The air smelled of oranges and dust and something fried I couldn't name. I bought a scarf. Yellow. The color of marigolds. The kind of color I would have avoided before. Too loud, too much. But it caught the sunlight like it belonged in my life. While Rosalie argued with a vendor over a basket, I sat under a faded umbrella with a cold drink and, out of habit, checked my messages. There was a voice memo. Not from David this time. From Amelia. I hesitated, then pressed play. Grandma, I don't know if you'll hear this, but miss you. Mom and Dad think you're trying to prove something. But I don't think so. I think you just got tired of being left behind. I would have been too. You look happy in that photo. I've never seen you look like that. Just call me, okay? Even if it's just for a minute. Her voice cracked on that last line. Even if it's just for a minute. Something inside me shifted. I listened again. And again. Then I stood, scarf in hand, and walked back to the hotel alone. The air was thick, the world loud, but inside me, everything had gone still. I sat on the edge of the bed for a long time, staring at the phone. And then I called her. Grandma. She answered on the second ring, her voice trembling. I'm here, sweetheart. Oh my God. Wait. I heard her move, the sound of a door closing, then silence. I was starting to think you'd gone totally rogue. Not rogue, I said softly. Just found something I'd forgotten I'd lost. What? She whispered. Myself. There was a pause, that kind of heavy, knowing silence that doesn't need filling. Then she said, I get it. I think I get it more than Mom and Dad do. And I believed her. We talked for 15 minutes about school, her art class, a boy who didn't like her back. Normal things. Precious things. Are you coming home soon? She asked quietly. I don't know yet. Can I see you when you do? Of course, baby. When we hung up, I sat there, smiling through tears I didn't bother to hide. It wasn't closure, not yet, but it was something real, something honest. Rosalie came back carrying a paper bag full of olives. Victory, she declared. We ate them on the balcony, the sunset burning the sky red. I think they're starting to understand, I said finally. Who? She asked. My family. She chewed slowly, then nodded. About time. That night I couldn't sleep. Not from sadness, but from something heavier. Something solid. It felt like standing on both sides of a door. One that was closing and another that was finally opening. In the morning, I tied the yellow scarf around my neck. No reason. Just because I could. Rosalie handed me a ticket. Granada, she said. We've got one more story in us. But Granada wasn't waiting with peace. It was waiting with truth, the kind that forces you to look in the mirror and decide what kind of woman you really are. I didn't expect Granada to feel like memory. But that's what it was. Soft air, narrow streets, the scent of stone and orange blossoms. The kind of city that doesn't rush you, just lets you think. We checked into a tiny inn owned by a man who looked permanently half tired, half wise. The place smelled of lemon polish and old dreams. Rosalie immediately opened the window. This city, she said, knows how to keep its secrets. I didn't reply. 'Cause I had my own. That night, I sat alone on the terrace, the street below glowing with soft amber light. My phone lay on the table beside me, dark and still. When I finally looked, there was one message. From David. Mom, did we lose you? Just 6 words. No blame. No demands. Just a question that cut straight through every defense I'd built. I didn't reply. Not yet. Instead, I opened the small notebook I'd bought back in Lisbon. Blank pages waiting. And I began to write the things I'd never said aloud. I wasn't always tired. I just got tired of not being seen. Every time you called me old-fashioned, I swallowed a sentence I should have said. I still remember when you were 5, and you gave me a rock you found in the yard and called it precious. That was the last time you gave me something just because. I wrote until my hand cramped, until the words stopped hurting. When I looked up, the city was asleep. The moon hung low, heavy and patient. Closed the notebook. I didn't cry. I just breathed. The next morning, Rosalie insisted we climb the hill to the Alhambra. You can't come to Granada and not see it, she said. I laughed. My knees might disagree. But we went, slowly, step by step. And every time I thought about stopping, I told myself, just one more stone. When we reached the top, I forgot how to breathe anyway. It was breathtaking. Arches carved with impossible detail, fountains whispering ancient languages, light and shadow painting the walls like prayers. I stood there, thinking about how many hands had built this place. How much time. How much patience. No rush. No apology. Just quiet mastery. And I realized, I'd lived most of my life rushing. Rushing to help. Rushing to please. Rushing to stay relevant in a world that had already decided I was background noise. But not here. Here, every inch of stone demanded reverence. It was the opposite of invisible. Rosalie snapped a photo of me sitting on a stone bench, sunlight pooling around me. "You look like someone who's remembered something important," she said. Smiled. "I have." She tilted her head. "And what's that?" "That I was never just the woman who stayed behind." We stood there in silence for a while, listening to the sound of running water. It was peaceful but not quiet. It was alive. That evening, back at the inn, there was a new voice message from Amelia. Her tone was careful, uncertain. "Grandma, Dad's starting to realize something. He asked if I'd heard from you." Said yes. He looked scared, not angry, just scared. "I think he knows he can't fix this with flowers or phone calls anymore." I told him, "You're not angry. You're just done waiting to be seen." I listened to her words 3 times. Then I sent her a photo, the one Rosalie had taken that morning. Me standing at the top of the hill, hands on hips, the Alhambra glowing behind me. No caption. Just the image. She replied with a single red heart. Nothing else. And that was enough. That night, as the fan hummed overhead and Rosalie snored softly in the next bed, I realized something that hit deeper than guilt or regret. You can love people fiercely and still need to leave them to find yourself. But life has a cruel sense of timing. Because just when I started to believe I was free, a new letter arrived. And this one wasn't from my son. It came wrapped in blue paper. No stamp. No return address. Just my name, Helen. I found it wedged under the door when I came back from breakfast. And for a moment I just stood there staring at it, feeling that familiar ache behind my ribs. Rosalie saw me from across the room. Another ghost from the past. "Maybe," I said softly. But this one wrote in cursive. I tore the paper open. It wasn't from David. It was from Laura, my daughter-in-law, the one who'd smiled politely while handing me chores instead of invitations. Her handwriting was careful, the kind you use when you're afraid of saying the wrong thing. "Helen, we've all been talking. David doesn't know how to reach you anymore. He thinks anything he says will come out wrong. I told him sometimes listening matters more. We didn't mean to leave you out. I know that doesn't fix anything, but it's the truth. We thought you'd be more comfortable at home." That was a lie. We were afraid, not of your age, but of what it reminded us of. "We're sorry. Sorry. If you ever decide to come home, we'd like to start over." No expectations. Just you as you are. I read it twice. Then again. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. Not a performance of guilt, just a confession of fear. I didn't cry. But I sat very still for a long time, listening to the hum of the city through the window. It wasn't forgiveness yet. But it was a beginning. Rosalie came back from the market carrying apricots and 2 small cups of espresso. When she saw the letter, she didn't ask. She just poured coffee and said, "Well? Home eventually." "Eventually," I said. She nodded slowly. "About time you threw the last punch." I laughed. Wasn't a punch. More like a door finally opened. That afternoon we walked through the city one last time. Granada glowed gold in the fading light, the air heavy with summer. We didn't say much. Just small things, small smiles. The kind of silence you only share when something inside you has settled. 2 days later, Rosalie left for France. She waved from the train window, silver hoops catching the sunlight. We didn't say goodbye. Too soon. And suddenly I was alone again. That night, I ordered a glass of wine and sat by the window. My yellow scarf lay folded on the table. My shoes were by the door, waiting for the next walk. But I didn't feel restless anymore. felt full. Tomorrow I'd buy a ticket. Not back to the life they'd left me with, but to the one I'd chosen for myself. When I finally did, the airport didn't feel like a goodbye. It felt like a pause, like I wasn't leaving something behind but bringing something back. The flight home was quiet. No tears. No movies. Just me, the hum of the engine, and the simple truth that I was no longer coming back as the woman they once dismissed. When I landed, no one was waiting. And that was okay. The air smelled like damp grass and familiarity. The taxi driver was young, chatty, and I let him talk. I just watched the city slip by. The bakery I used to take Amelia to, the park where David broke his arm, the pharmacy where Laura and I once stood side by side pretending everything was fine. They weren't painful memories anymore. Just old ones. Pages I'd already read. When I finally reached my house, the porch was clean, the plants watered. The key still turned easily in the lock. Inside, everything waited, like it had been holding its breath for me. I didn't unpack right away. I made tea instead. Sat at the kitchen table, the same one that had once felt like a cage, and let the silence stretch. It wasn't heavy anymore. It was mine. Then a buzz. A message from Amelia. "Are you home?" "Yes," I typed back. 10 minutes later, another ping. "Can I come by?" I didn't hesitate. Doors open. 20 minutes later, she was on the porch, backpack still on, eyes bright. No ceremony. No speeches. Just a long, quiet hug that said more than either of us could. She sat across from me, looking older somehow. "Viser. I liked your list," she said suddenly. "My list." He grinned. "You left your notebook open in one of your photos." I read it. Well, part of it. I should have been embarrassed. But I wasn't. For the first time in a long time I felt seen. Then she reached into her bag and pulled out a notebook of her own. And what she'd written inside made me realize this story wasn't just about me anymore. She placed it gently on the table between us. A small spiral notebook with bent corners and her name scrawled across the cover in blue ink. "I started one too," she said softly. And blinked. "One what?" "A list." Then she flipped it open. On the first page, written in bold, shaky letters, were words that stole my breath. "I refuse to inherit quietly." She read the rest out loud, her voice trembling but steady. "The belief that women outgrow desire. The idea that aging means decline. The habit of saying, 'I'm fine' when I'm not. The silence that follows when someone says I'm too much. The shame that's passed down like furniture." I just stared at her. This girl, this woman, who'd grown up watching me disappear into the background, now sitting across from me, declaring herself seen. I reached for her hand. My voice cracked when I spoke. "You're going to be all right." She smiled, a little tearful. "Because you were." And right there, something inside me broke open and healed all at once. We spent hours talking about her art school, her mother's worries, the boy who still hadn't noticed her. It felt like breathing again after years underwater. At one point she leaned back and said, "You know, Mom still talks too loud when she's nervous." I laughed. "Some things never change." She hesitated then. "Dad hasn't called, has he?" "No," I said quietly. She looked down. "He's scared." "Of me?" "No," she said softly. "Of what you've become. Of what he never let himself see before." I didn't answer. The truth didn't need a reply. The doorbell rang. Amelia froze. "That's them." I didn't move. "I'll get it," she whispered. Muffled voices filled the hall, soft, uncertain. Then David stepped into the kitchen. He looked older, smaller somehow. Like guilt had been sitting on his shoulders and finally decided to show its weight. "I wanted to come alone," he said quietly. "But your daughter insisted." Laura appeared behind him. No makeup, no posture, no armor. She spoke first. "We don't know how to start." Understood. "You already did. You showed up." David took a step forward. His voice wavered. "I didn't want to lose you." "You didn't," I said gently. "You just stopped seeing me." He nodded slowly, eyes glistening. "I'm sorry." Not dramatic. Not rehearsed. Just honest. It was enough. I made tea, I said. There's still some in the pot. We sat together, not as a family trying to fix the past, but as people quietly learning how to exist in the same room again. There were awkward pauses, too many silences. But this time I didn't rush to fill them. I let them sit. I let them feel what I'd lived in for years. Laura spoke more than David. She always had. But her voice was softer now. She asked about my trip. About the places, the food, the people. I gave her glimpses, not the whole story. Some things you don't hand back so easily. When they left, David lingered by the door. "Can I?" he started, then stopped. "Do you want to come for dinner sometime? Just us." I didn't say yes. But I didn't say no either. He seemed relieved by that. After they left, the house felt quiet again. But not empty. This wasn't the brittle quiet that breaks if you breathe too loud. This was the soft kind, the pause before a new sentence. I sat on the porch that night with a blanket over my lap, my notebook open again. At the top of the page I wrote, "Things I know now. People don't notice your silence until it costs them something. Leaving isn't the same as running away. You can still start over at 72. Some doors don't need to be slammed, just closed softly but firmly. Your voice isn't gone. It's waiting for you to stop asking for permission." I tapped the pen against the page, then added one more line. "Forgiveness isn't for them. It's for your own breath." And when I closed the notebook, I realized this wasn't just my story anymore. Because the next afternoon, Amelia walked back through that door with a decision of her own, one that would change both of our lives forever. She didn't knock this time. The door just swung open, sunlight pouring in behind her, and there she was. Amelia, hair in a messy bun, eyes bright and burning with something fierce. "I made a decision," she said, dropping her bag by the door. I looked up from my notebook. "That sounds dangerous." She grinned. "I'm applying to the program in Berlin." Froze. "Berlin?" She nodded quickly, excitement flickering with fear. "It's far, I know. Mom's already freaking out. But I need to do this." The old me, the one who spent decades keeping everyone safe, small and close, would have hesitated, would have said, "Be careful," would have reminded her of responsibilities and risks. But that woman, she didn't live here anymore. I closed the notebook and looked at her. "Then you should go." She blinked, startled. "Really? Don't wait for permission," I said. "You'll miss your life." She smiled then, slow, radiant, the kind of smile that starts in the chest. "I knew you'd understand." We spent the day together, cooking soup, laughing about nothing, talking about everything. She asked about Rosalie, about Spain, about the dance night by the docks. "You're kind of a legend, Grandma," she teased. I laughed. "No, love. I'm just finally myself." Before she left, she handed me a small envelope. "Don't open it till I'm gone," she said. After she left, I sat at the table for a while, the envelope resting in my palm like a heartbeat. Inside was a drawing, charcoal on cream paper. The beach in Cadiz. Me, standing at the water's edge, arms open, head tilted toward the horizon. At the bottom, she'd written, "She didn't come back the same." And that was the point. My throat tightened. I placed it beside Paul's photo on the mantel. He would have understood. The next morning, another letter arrived. Real paper. Blue ink. David's handwriting. "Mom, thank you for the tea. For letting us sit in the silence. See it now. I don't expect forgiveness, but I'd like to try. Not to erase anything, but to build something better. If you're willing." I folded it carefully. I didn't reply right away. Some silences aren't meant to be filled. They're meant to be honored. The days passed quietly. I watered my own plants, cooked for myself, took morning walks, not to punish anyone, not to prove anything, just to feel the shape of my life without needing someone else to define it. It was a good shape. Then one Sunday I called David. 5 o'clock, I said. "I'll bring dessert." He sounded surprised. "Careful." "Okay, Mom." When I arrived, Laura opened the door. No forced smile. No overcompensation. Just a quiet, "Come in." I walked through their house like a guest. New furniture. New art. The air smelled different. And I realized that didn't hurt anymore. They'd kept living. So had I. Amelia was already at the table. She kissed my cheek. "I made salad," she whispered. "Don't tell Mom if it's bad." Dinner was quiet but easy, the kind of awkward that felt like progress. David asked questions. Laura listened. Amelia laughed. For once, I didn't perform. I didn't fill the silence. Just was. Near the end of the meal, David cleared his throat. I read your notebook." I looked up. "You what?" "The one in that photo." Amelia showed me. I raised an eyebrow. "She did she?" "She said it was important," he said. "And it was. Hurt. But I think that's what truth does." "Good," I said softly. "Because it means you finally heard me." He nodded, slow and heavy. "I did." Laura set down her fork. We want to do better." "I'm not here for promises," I said. "I'm here to see if you're learning." We sat in that truth together. And it felt right. After dessert, lemon tart, just sharp enough to wake the tongue, Amelia unfolded a small piece of paper. "I want to read something," she said, her voice trembling. "My grandma taught me that disappearing quietly is a slow kind of death. That staying soft isn't the same as staying silent. That women don't owe their energy to the comfort of others. That love doesn't mean shrinking yourself. And that it's okay to outgrow your place at the table. And demand a new one." No one spoke. Not even me. Laura started clearing dishes, tears in her eyes. David helped her. Amelia poured more tea. I just sat back, hands resting in my lap, and let the quiet fill the room. A different kind of quiet this time. The kind you earn. When I left, David walked me to the door. "I know it'll take time," he said. "I have time," I answered. Then I reached into my bag and handed him a small envelope. He frowned. "What's this?" "A copy of the tickets," I said. "The ones I cancelled." He froze. "I kept them," I said. "Not out of spite but out of truth, so we don't forget how easy it was to erase me." He didn't open it. Just nodded, eyes glassy. We didn't hug. But we stood close, like people finally learning to exist without apology. When I got home, I took off my earrings, folded my scarf, stood in front of the mirror and studied the face staring back. Older, yes, but not tired. Lined but alive. I traced one wrinkle with my finger and smiled. They weren't cracks. They were paths. All the roads I'd walked back to myself. Then I opened my notebook and wrote the final page. Things I no longer apologize for. Wanting space. Wanting more. Saying no. Leaving quietly. Coming back louder. And beneath that, one last line. I was never too old. I was just never asked if I still dreamed. Now I don't wait to be asked. Go. The morning after dinner, the world felt still. Not silent, not empty. Just still, like life had finally unclenched its fists. I woke before dawn. Made tea. Sat by the window and watched the light crawl up the walls. It's strange. How peace doesn't arrive with a fanfare. It slips in softly, like an apology whispered by the universe. The house smelled like lemons from last night's tart. The plate was still on the counter, a single crumb clinging to the edge. I didn't wipe it away. I let it stay, proof that something good had finally happened here. I glanced at Paul's photo on the mantel, next to Amelia's drawing. For a long time I used to think life ended when people left you. But maybe it really begins when you stop leaving yourself. I thought about that train to Seville, that first night I dared to sit in stillness and not answer the phone. How terrified I was of being forgotten. And yet, here I was, not forgotten, not erased, just free. The garden outside looked overgrown. Wild. I smiled at that. Maybe not everything needs pruning. Maybe some things are meant to grow messy and beautiful, just like healing. My phone buzzed. Message from Rosalie. Marseille is divine. They think I'm a retired art thief now. Don't correct them. Love are. I laughed so loudly I startled the cat that wasn't even mine. She'd sent a photo too. A sketch of two women dancing. One with a yellow scarf, arms lifted to the sky. I framed it right there by the kitchen window so I'd see it every morning. Sometimes I still hear the music from that night in Cadiz. Faint, ghostly like memories hum. But now it doesn't ache. Glows. That afternoon Amelia came over again. No plans, no reason. She just walked in and dropped onto the couch like she used to when she was little. "I'm scared," she said suddenly. "Of Berlin." She nodded. "Of leaving. Of not belonging." Smiled. "Then you're exactly where you're supposed to be. Every good story starts with a little fear." She tilted her head. "Did you feel that when you left?" "Every second," I said. "But you dance anyway." She grinned. That same half-wild grin I'd seen in her as a child, when she'd jump into puddles just to watch the splash. And for a second I saw it so clearly. The echo of myself in her, but freer. That's what healing does. Doesn't erase the scars. It rewrites who inherits them. Before she left, she asked, "Do you think people ever really change?" I looked at her, at this girl-woman with a suitcase full of courage, and said, "No. I think we just remember who we were before we forgot." She hugged me tight. "I'll write to you," she whispered. "Don't," I said. "Live first. Write later." When she walked out, sunlight hit the space where she'd stood, warm and blinding. The quiet filled the house again. But it wasn't the same quiet that once broke me. It was the kind that holds you. The kind that breathes with you. I poured myself another cup of tea. Sat back. Closed my eyes. I wasn't waiting for anyone anymore. Not for calls. Not for validation. Not even for closure. Because I finally understood. Closure isn't something you find. Something you decide. I reached for my notebook. The same one that had followed me through every train station and city square. One blank page left. At the top I wrote, "Things I will begin." And I started listing. Learning Italian. Painting badly. Laughing loudly. Buying fresh marigolds for no reason at all. Living without apology. The pen moved easily now. No shaking. No doubt. Just truth. Outside, the wind picked up, rustling through the trees like someone turning the page. Maybe it was time to write a new story. Not one about leaving. Not one about loss. But one about returning. Returning to the woman who'd been buried under years of being everything for everyone. Returning to the voice that no longer asked to be heard. Returning to the joy that didn't need permission to exist. Smiled. Whispered into the empty room. "I'm here." And for the first time in my life, that was enough. But the story didn't end there. Because sometimes when you think your journey's complete, life hands you one more test. And this one would show me whether freedom still meant standing alone or finally standing with. The letter came on a Wednesday morning. Real paper, blue ink. David's handwriting. No text. No voicemail. Just an envelope with my name written carefully, like he didn't want to startle it. Inside it said, "Mom, thank you for the tea. For letting us sit in the silence. See it now. I don't expect to be forgiven, but I'd like to try. Not to erase anything. Just to build something better if you're willing." That was it. No dramatics. No begging. Just truth. And for once, truth was enough. I folded the letter and set it on the table beside my cup. I didn't write back. Not yet. Some silences aren't meant to be filled. They're meant to be honored. Days passed quietly. I watered my plants. I walked each morning down the same street I used to rush through, this time with no destination at all. I didn't feel alone anymore. Just present. It's funny how peace feels so small when it finally arrives. Not the grand ending you imagine. Just breathing without flinching. I spent hours in the garden. My hands dirty, the sun warm on my back. The earth didn't care about age or guilt or what anyone thought I should have been. It only asked one thing of me, keep growing. Then one morning I called David. "Sunday," I said, 5 o'clock. "I'll bring dessert." He didn't say much. Just, okay. And that was enough. When I arrived, Laura opened the door. No nervous smile this time. No forced warmth. Just quiet honesty. "Come in," she said. The walls looked different. Maybe it was them, maybe it was me, maybe both. Dinner was simple. Lemon tart again. David asked questions. Laura listened more than she spoke. And Amelia made jokes just to fill the spaces that used to ache. Toward the end, David cleared his throat. "I read your notebook," he said, his voice careful. I looked up slowly. "What notebook?" "The one from the photo. Amelia showed me parts of it." "Did she?" He nodded. "It hurt." "Good," I said quietly. He blinked. "Good." "Yes," I said. "Because it means you finally heard me." Laura reached for his hand. "We want to do better," she said softly. "I'm not here for promises," I told them. "I'm here to see if you're learning." And for the first time they both nodded. Not defensively, not fearfully, just honestly. Amelia unfolded a small page from her pocket. "Can I read something?" she asked. She began. "My grandma taught me that disappearing quietly is a slow kind of death. That staying soft isn't the same as staying silent. That women don't owe their energy to anyone's comfort. That loving someone doesn't mean becoming small for them. That it's okay to outgrow your place at the table and demand a new one." Her voice trembled, but she didn't falter. When she finished, no one spoke for a long while. And I thought, this is what legacy really means. Not heirlooms, not recipes, but courage passed down like light through a window. When I left that night, David walked me to the door. "I know it'll take time," he said. "I have time," I told him. Then I handed him a small envelope. "What's this?" "A copy of the tickets," I said. "The ones I cancelled." He stared at it. "I kept them. Not out of spite. Out of truth. So we don't forget how easy it was to erase me." He didn't open it. Just tucked it into his pocket and nodded. We didn't hug. We didn't need to. When I got home, I undressed slowly. Removed my earrings. Folded my yellow scarf. I stood in front of the mirror and really looked. Not for flaws, not for lost years, but for the woman who'd finally come back. Yes, there were lines where there used to be smoothness. But they weren't cracks. They were maps. Every crease, a road that led me here, to myself. Before bed, I opened my notebook one last time. At the top of the page I wrote, "Things I no longer apologize for." And I listed them. Wanting space. Wanting more. Saying no. Leaving quietly. Coming back louder. At the bottom I paused. Then added one final line. "I was never too old. I was just never asked if I still dreamed. Now I don't wait to be asked. I go." Closed the notebook. Turned off the light. And for the first time in 72 years. Slept without waiting for tomorrow to explain itself. Because maybe that's the real secret. You don't find freedom by being brave once. You find it by choosing over and over again to keep going. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe, and if you've lived through something similar, share your story in the comments. Your voice matters.